Mr. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, and I believe that one thing you were particularly concerned about as an organization was how business remained silent and is so silent around gender-based violence.
Yes, indeed. Faith, thank you for having me, and greetings to the viewers at home. I think this is an issue that affects the entire country, and therefore both public and private sector should really put shoulder to the wheel in ensuring that we turn the scourge around and really create a South Africa that is peaceful and is an environment in which all people or all citizens can thrive, whether women or men, and across the race line as well. So indeed, we believe that both public sector and private sector should play their part in ensuring that this is turned around.
How do we make them play their part, though, Lesego? So it's one thing to say that they should, but if they're watching you right now and saying, actually, you know what, our budget is not even looking into that, how then do you start addressing those issues practically?
I think practically, budget can always be created. The president has set the tone in creating a 1.1 billion financial pool to address this challenge. In the same vein, businesses have various programs around employee wellness and around issues of gender parity and ensuring that there's gender redress. And so I think it's just a whole lot of us as a collective putting our minds together and really identifying those low-hanging fruits that will allow us to turn this around. At the heart of it is also a moral degeneration, which we've been experiencing over a long period of time. And so how do we start to inculcate that principle and that value that says human life matters, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of age? And obviously the most marginalized tend to become women and children, because part of the challenge is that women are generally not economically empowered, and that translates to them remaining in abusive relationships just so that they can survive.
And of course that will go into the issue around addressing gender parity, looking at equal pay in the workforce, that just because you are a female in a particular role does not mean you have to earn less than your male counterpart. And also addressing the issues around security, as you're mentioning, that just because I'm not the provider in the household does not give you the right to treat me the way that you want to treat me as a slave.
Absolutely. And I think it's two-pronged. So you see it at the lower levels of society in the manner that I've described already. You also see it in the more affluent levels of society, in that there is a challenge in how you deal with a progressive woman, how you deal with an empowered woman. What does that translate to in terms of the relationship between women and men? And so whilst the president has indicated that it is a challenge that men should bear the brunt for, I think we have the responsibility to coexist and make sure that we sit around the room collectively, both men and women, and start unpacking these societal issues and how we think we can actually address them and come up with meaningful solutions that create a sustainably peaceful South Africa, which is a beautiful country.
So how do you explain the notion, and many people would argue and say that maybe the reason why we're seeing gender-based violence manifest itself in society the way it has, especially in recent times, is because men are feeling a little bit frustrated and they feel as though there's no place for them in this new world of an empowered woman. How do you address that?
I think that's part of the challenge. The other challenge is that we are living in a period of scarcity. The economy is not growing. There's joblessness. We're sitting in a country with the highest level of unemployment rate, the highest we've seen, in the past 25 years. And so when that translates to, one, the scarcity, and therefore my masculinity is questioned. Secondly, we've been driving the women empowerment agenda so aggressively that perhaps we've left our men behind. And so how do we start to redress and rebalance that issue? Because in the absence of that, you are going to have an element of pushback, and it translates in many other societal issues, some of which we began to see in the past 2 weeks.
And I'm going to ask you a question there. So is it because, we've seen, obviously statistics and crime stats are saying that there is a significant rise, especially when it comes to gender-based violence, and obviously we've seen in recent times, we've coined the new notion of femicide, which was not necessarily a term that was used about 10, 15 years ago. So then how do we then start, looking at it from even the younger boys that are coming up? Because we've been seeing videos on social media of younger children who are actually engaging in violence between male and female.
Yeah. So at the fundamental heart of it is we need to go back to basics. We need to go back to the principles of Ubuntu, the principle that says, I am because you are, the principle that says, you reflect or are an indication of my sister, you're an indication of my mother. Therefore, if I would not do that to my parents or my siblings, I should not do it to you as my neighbor or as my classmate or as my colleague or even as my partner. I think we've moved so far from the basis of our moral code that it's beginning to play itself out in the way that it is at the moment. And so it's important that we go back to those basics and teach them from a young age all over again. And ensure that, we subscribe to those values that says human life is indeed important and that there's enough for all of us to exist and coexist in a meaningful way.
You know, it reminded me of a recent statement that was actually articulated by COPE leader Musole Koto, who says that I will not hit another woman because I come from a woman. And that issue around humanity and being able to be cognizant of the fact that ultimately we all come from a woman. We're going to leave it there for this afternoon, but thanks all for joining us. This is Sinelo from the International Women's Forum South Africa, giving us the latest in terms of their response on gender-based violence.